All right, Steve, we're on the air.
Hello, everybody. Well, this is a real interesting story today that I want to tell you. And I call it a day in the life because you never knew on the road with Jerry and the Grateful Dead what was going to happen. And this is a Jerry Garcia band story. And Jerry loved his band. Oh, he had so much fun. And when we started it in San Francisco, first he played with Howard Wales and Merle back and forth, Merle Saunders. And this was a group that he had with Merle Saunders, Bill Kreutzmann playing drums. Um, what do you call it? There's Bill, and that was Merle Saunders on the organ on the B3. And we'd go out on the road, and we were at a special gig that we were doing in New York City in Greenwich Village at an old club there called the Bottom Line. And here's John Conn and Jerry, and we had so much fun playing with that band and going on the road because it was so different than the Grateful Dead. We were on our own, and we had all the great stuff that all the music of Jerry brought to us, man. Everybody loved that band. And it was Jerry's scene, and he let me manage it. We had such a great time. Now, at this time right here, there's me and Merle, and that's Merle Jr., Merle's son, his younger son. He's also got an older son, Tony, who played bass with the band for a while. And this was a happy moment here. We're just hanging out. And that night was incredible because this strangest thing happened. After the sound check, we were hanging out in the Bottom Line, and Jerry stayed behind with me. I was there watching the gear. I was never going to leave the gear and guitars alone, especially in New York. And Kid Candelario was helping me, my partner from the Grateful Dead and in the Jerry band. And we were there together. And he took off for a while. Everybody went back to the hotel, and it was just me and Jerry hanging out in the back room. Then the guy who worked there, Stan, comes over and he says to me, "Hey, there's a guy here to see you." And I said, "What's his name?" He said, "Ronnie Sunshine." I said, "Ronnie Sunshine? What?" He was a hippie kid in New York who actually used to pick us up with the Grateful Dead. He had a long Cadillac limo, and he made himself the hippie driver of us. And so he came in and he said, "Hey, I brought somebody with me." And we said, "What?" We hadn't seen him in years. And he used to come and pick us up. And here's who he brought: John Lennon. He was hanging out and driving Lennon around at the time. Lennon was living in New York, playing a little bit with a band called the Elephant's Memory. And he was just absorbing the New York scene. And he was going through a lot of different changes himself. And here he came in. And what an amazing time. Then Ronnie had to go somewhere. He left and he just leaves John with me and Jerry, introduces us all. And we're sitting there and we're smoking weed and having the greatest conversation. My God, Jerry and John loved each other and they just had met right then and there. And there I was sitting there with them, and I was in heaven because I loved the Beatles, and Jerry did, and John represented so much of our culture and life to us. And it was so great to see them get off on each other and talk about all this cool stuff. John talked about his life, Jerry talked about his. It went on for a couple of hours. It was the most amazing thing I could witness. I was so loved it. We had other times where John was around us, but this was really something special to be there with him alone, just like that. And those 3 hours went so quick. Now it's getting close to the club opening, and so I knew the guys were coming back soon, and Jerry invited John to play that night with the band, but he had a couple of wine, drank a couple of glasses of wine. He didn't feel comfortable, and he said so. He said, "I don't think I'm at my best. I'm not ready. I don't really know this stuff, and I'd like to, have a chance to maybe someday play with you, Jerry. I would love it." And so he took a break there with us. And then all of a sudden, now it's time where the club was about to open, right? And so we'll get back to this in a minute, but uh, the New York Hells Angels, their clubhouse was only a few blocks away, and they had to come see Jerry. They had to come see me. They were friends of ours, and they began to show up, and about 10 of them came in all of a sudden in the back room, and the party just broke that up. They were just wild to see John Lennon. And this is Big Vinny right here. And Vinny was at the show. And I want to go back. Do we have a picture of Bernard Purdy we could show for a second? Now, this is really an interesting thing. That night was so star-studded. Kreutzmann was playing drums. In shows up Bernard Purdy, the legend of drummers, man. This guy was so known to all of us. Mr. Polyrhythmic, we called him, because everybody knew he could play. Each hand, each arm, each foot was playing its own thing, man. He was something to see. And he wanted to sit in, and Kreutzmann was put off a little bit, but he let him play. And what a night that was. He played 2 songs, and then he just took off. Now, back to Big Vinny. Now, Big Vinny represents something really interesting here. Bernard was playing, and Vinny, that's him with one of his pit bulls out in front of the clubhouse in New York City on 3rd Street. Now, Vinny never wore a shirt, man. I don't care if it was winter, summer, fall, you name it. He rode his motorcycle with just like that, the way you see him right there. And he had a giant demon tattooed on his chest, and it was the scariest tattoo I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of things in my life, but you didn't want to look in the eyes of that demon on his chest. And so it was a kind of a wintry night too. And he came riding up with just like that, with no shirt. He came in, joshed around with Jerry and John Lennon. And then he was out in the house, and I was out there, and he asked if we had any electric. That was our way of talking about LSD. And Kid had a little bit. I had a little bit. We both gave him what we had, and he just took it all. He squeezed a whole bottle of liquid acid down his throat. And I couldn't believe it. And so later on that night, when this crazy night with John Lennon and Bernard Purdy and incredible music playing there, at the end of the night, as we were leaving, and we did something that night that we never did. We let the band go back in the limos to the hotel. We were staying way uptown on Central Park South. And here we are in Greenwich Village, way downtown. And Kid and I knew a lot of people in New York from the Grateful Dead and everything. And there was a guy that we knew, he was a fireman, and his name was Terry. But Terry, his dad was a fireman. His brothers were all firemen. And he lived in Brooklyn and in Bay Ridge. And he was an amazing guy. But he was also involved in the netherworld, if you get my drift here. And so he had this beautiful Chrysler Imperial, man, a brand new one. And so he said, I'll give you guys a ride up. I'll give you guys a ride in my car up to the hotel. And so we said, you will? Okay, we'll go with you. So it's 4:00 in the morning now, and the club's closing. And we get into Terry's car with him. And Kid had met a young lady at the show, and he had her with him. We all had winter coats on. And we pull up, we go about 2 blocks from there, and I'm talking to Terry, and we're smoking a joint. And we had, in my pocket, I had an ounce of Thai weed. In Kid's pocket, he had an ounce of Thai weed. And Terry had this giant piece of hash in his pocket of his shirt. And he's driving, and we're talking, because he'd come out and stayed with us in California. We knew him pretty well. And his brother was Weasel, and we knew him too. And so Terry, we pull up to a red light, and it's 4:00 in the morning. And we're talking, and I look over, and there's a New York City police car, just like this one you see in this picture. It was parked on the curb over on the other side, on the left side. And the cops were asleep in there. And I'll never forget this red-headed officer. He looked over, and when he saw the car, he jumped up, and he was grabbing his partner. And you don't look at a policeman when he's there. It's an old thing of the street. You don't look at the police. You never do. So you act like you're just looking straight ahead. But I could see out of the corner of my eye that they were really riled up. I said to Terry, what's going on? Is this car hot or something? Why are they doing that? As soon as the light changed, they flipped on their cherries and shoved us over to the side of the road. And that's when I really got nervous, because in front there were 2 unmarked cars, and they cops jumped out from both sides with guns right on us, and they held us. And then over the loudspeaker of the cop car, it said, "This car meets the description of a car used in an armed robbery in Brooklyn where a police officer was killed. Don't get out of the car." And then they sealed off the street behind us. They sealed off the street in front of us. I couldn't believe it. I said to myself, wow, this is serious, man. And I figured we were going to the famous jail in Manhattan, the Tombs. That's where you go. That's the city jail there. A terrible place. And so I just was making my mind up to that. I go, God, this beautiful day, John Lennon, Bernard Purdie, all this great music, working all day from early on at the show, and then now possibly going to jail or worse. And so now helicopters are showing up, paddy wagons, ambulances, top brass, man. I'm talking about captains and lieutenants, and they all standing around. And then when everybody was there, they said they were waiting for a female. They told us over the PA, don't get out of the car. They say again, because the girl was in the back seat. They needed a female officer. When one arrived, the red-headed cop, he was shaking like a leaf, and he puts the gun right on me. I'm sitting in the shotgun seat, and I thought he was going to shoot me, man. He was shaking so hard. I put my hands up, and I said real loud, I said, I got no guns. He opened the door, and I got out, and with my hands up, and they searched the car. They looked everywhere in the car. They pulled us out. They went through my pockets and kids. They squeezed my tie sticks. They squeezed kids' tie sticks, but they didn't say a word about them. I knew what they were doing. They were looking for weapons, man. They figured if these guys killed a cop, they're armed, well armed. And they didn't find anything. If they had found a bullet, had they had found anything, they would have probably just gone crazy. But we didn't have anything like that. And then after a while, they asked me, they said, we showed them our IDs and we were from California. They said, what are you guys doing down here? I said, we played at the Bottom Line. And they said to me, well, who's the owner? And I happen to know it was Stan Sadowski. When I said that, it was their beat right down there. They knew, that's right, that's the owner. He's on the level. So they started to unwind this crazy scene. All the roadblock went away. The helicopters split. The ambulances left. The paddy wagons left. And the cop said to me, he said, you better be careful. Don't smoke no more of that weed on your way uptown because you're going to get pulled over again, man. And so they let us go. And then I look over at Terry. We're driving back up to the hotel, and Terry goes, they never looked in the trunk. They never looked in the trunk. What's in the trunk? I said, Terry, what's in the trunk? Well, he had a duffel bag in there with 28 pounds of marijuana. And just recently, they had what they call the Rockefeller law, which was life imprisonment for drug dealing, even for marijuana. It was still that serious. And so here we had 28 pounds. What would they have said had they looked in the trunk? They never did. The end of an amazing day. We made it up to the hotel. Kid and I looked at each other and we said, we're never taking a ride from anybody except our official limo company or however we're with the band is taking us on their transport. And we stuck to that the rest of our days on the road. What a day. Thank you. Thanks for listening, my friends. You're the best audience ever. You're the greatest people. And I love you. Subscribe to the station. If you like this episode, hit the like button. Give us a really nice feeling of your comments and what you think. And you know what? We'll see you again because we got you and you got us. Thank you, Jeremy. And we'll see you next time from Big Steve's Backstage Pass. Thank you. Thank you.